First, in a kind of high-stakes showdown between senior Vatican officials, in fact, just about as senior as they come, short of the Pope himself, and the leadership of the German Bishops' Conference, the Germans essentially promised to be good boys when it comes to the implementation of their controversial synodal way. We'll explain what was said and what to expect going forward. Third, we have high anxiety. That describes the state of things in Europe in the wake of the terrorist attack in Moscow that at latest count has left 139 people dead. We'll explain what additional security measures we might expect this week in Rome as the annual Christian calendar reaches its crescendo in Holy Week. Fourth, we've got This is an Ex-Cleric. That, of course, an homage to the famous Monty Python Ex-Parrot sketch. Only in this case, the subject is a good deal more serious. A Belgian cleric has been expelled not only as a bishop, but as a priest, on the back of sexual abuse to which he admitted some 14 years ago. We'll explain why it took so long, and perhaps why it is happening now. And finally, fifth, we've got the social gospel, how the death of the martyrdom, really, of an Italian Catholic priest 80 years ago this past Sunday captures the birth of Catholic social teaching in miniature. All that and more is waiting for you on this edition of Last Week in the Church, so please stay where you are because I will be right back. This is our official Last Week in the Church infomercial, because I come to you with a special offer for all of those woodbecks, but also the best and brightest. And I'm kind of out of Tuesdays, but with everything going on right now, there are going to be times periodically when we come out perhaps a day or so late. We apologize for that. But, whatever we lack in punctuality, we are going to try to make up for in perspicacity. How's that for a P word? All right, let's dive in this week. We have health, hype, and hope. Pope Francis on Sunday generated what can only be described as a kind of mini tempest around the state of his health by failing to deliver his homily at the Palm Sunday Mass. Now, at one level, that shouldn't produce any particular frisson. The Pope, for some weeks now, in fact, some months now, has been battling what the Vatican has at various points described as a cold, the flu, bronchitis, but in any event, has been struggling with difficulties in terms of breathing and public speaking because of the breathing difficulties, and has on multiple occasions, including most recently in public, the Wednesday before the Palm Sunday Mass during his general audience, he has often asked somebody else to read his prepared text for him. And had that been what happened on Palm Sunday, I don't suspect anyone would have been unduly alarmed because it would have fit the narrative that we have already seen. And that narrative typically is Pope Francis will come at a public event, he will open up with a few remarks of his own, then he'll have somebody else read the canned speech, and then he usually comes back at the end with a few either off-the-cuff or semi-off-the-cuff remarks. And generally, then shakes hands, slaps backs, kisses babies, seems basically fine, apart from the breathing difficulties. So, had that been the deal on Palm Sunday, I don't think anybody's blood pressure would have shot through the roof. But that's not quite what happened. Instead, what happened is that morning, the Vatican, as is standard practice, sent an advance copy of the Pope's homily to journalists under embargo, meaning we can't publish it until he actually reads it. And, what people do is they prepare stories based on that advance copy so they can be ready to go when the time comes. Among them, my wife Elise, one of her typically erudite and elan-filled analyses of the papal homily, so we were all good to go. And, we had the Mass on the live feed from the Vatican. And, of course, as you know, the Palm Sunday Gospel is the longest Gospel of the year.
That's right.
It takes, half hour, 40 minutes, depending on how it's done, to play out.
Yes.
So at the very end of this very long Gospel, there was this sort of agonizing silence when Pope Francis had been repositioned, because during the Gospel, he was sitting facing the altar, that is, with his back sort of to the crowd. He had been repositioned so that he was facing the crowd. And there was this long silence where people, for all the world, it seemed as if everyone was waiting for him to speak. And nothing happened And then after a couple of moments, it was announced to the crowd that the Pope had decided not to deliver his homily and that we were moving immediately to the profession of faith. Now, that in itself was sort of shocking. I mean, in the sense that it seemed that this caught everyone off guard. That is, that this had not been planned in advance. And then the Vatican didn't, to be honest with you, really help itself as things played out. Because after a little bit, we got communique from the Vatican about the Palm Sunday Mass, which basically simply said that after the gospel, after a period of reflection after the gospel, the Mass continued. Well, okay. Which, in other words, they were trying to make it sound like nothing to see here. This is all, it's the old vaudeville rule, right? No matter what happens, make it look like part of the act. And so that seemed to be what they were trying to do. And then, just to compound the silliness, later we got another note from the Vatican saying that because the homily had not been delivered, it did not exist. Now, that's just ridiculous. I mean, the homily obviously exists. Most people in the Vatican press corps have, what they should have said, of course, is that it should not be considered official, or it should not be written about because it wasn't delivered and therefore was not willed by the Pope. Okay, that's fine. But to claim that it didn't exist is a little silly. So what are we to make of all of this? Let us add that after the Pope skipped his homily, later, at the conclusion of the liturgy, he delivered his traditional noontime Sunday Angelus address in his own voice, seemed perfectly capable of doing that, and then was able to climb into the back of the Pope-mobile and do his normal swing through St. Peter's Square. Camera, of course, at his back the whole time, and he seemed animated, relaxed, energized, and thoroughly enjoying himself. So, look, I don't think anybody believes that we are at the same place we were when Pope John Paul II, famously skipped his homily at his last Palm Sunday Mass in 2005, and then 3 weeks later was dead. I don't think anyone believes that it's the same level of gravity right now. Although, on the other hand, of course, we are talking about an 87-year-old Pope who's had, just in the last year, a couple of major surgeries, and who has got a variety of different medical conditions. Now, his surgeon, by the way, gave an interview to an Italian news outlet this week, basically saying he didn't see any particular reason to be concerned. He said the Pope has the mind of a 60-year-old, but the body of an 87-year-old. He has the normal ailments that come with that, but according to Dr. Sergio Alfieri, seems to be coping with those elements perfectly fine, and there's every reason to believe that he's good to go for a while. So, bottom line, is this cause for concern? Absolutely, yes, it is. Are we on a death watch? I would say that for most observers right now, the answer to that question is no. They would probably also add, stay tuned. All right. Second up, this week, we've got the Germans blink first. So, one of the long-running sagas in global Catholicism over the last few years has been the German synodal way and the perception that it is running ahead of Pope Francis's own reform agenda, that is going places that Pope Francis does not want them to go, at least not yet, and that therefore creating the risk that things are just going to spin out of control. To some extent, this is about contested issues in the church, such as the blessing of same-sex marriages, not just unions, but marriages, women clergy, married priests, and on and on, all things that the German synodal way, in one way or another, seemed to endorse. But tensions of late have come to a head over governance. That is, a new plan for governance of the German Catholic Church that came out as a result of the synodal way, which envisions not a conference of bishops making decisions for the German Church, but rather a new council that can be composed of both laity and bishops. And in fact, if you look at the draft statutes, it would be composed of, decisions would be made on a 2/3 basis, and the number of bishops who would be part of this council would be just one vote short of a third, meaning, in theory, binding decisions could be made for the church in Germany without a single bishop saying yes. Okay? Now, the Vatican had, on several occasions, told the Germans, you can't do that it subverts the hierarchical nature of the church. The Germans seemed to say, thanks for the advice, but we're going to go ahead anyway. In other words, every time the Vatican tried to change the light to red, the Germans just blew through the intersection. Well, so all that leads to a high-profile meeting that took place this week here in Rome, or last week, rather, between the leadership of the German Bishops' Conference and a kind of all-star lineup of Vatican heavy hitters. So you had Secretary of State Cardinal Pietro Parolin, Cardinal Robert Prevost, who heads the Dicastery for Bishops, Cardinal Victor Manuel Fernandez, who heads the Dicastery for the Faith, other big guns in the Vatican arsenal. And at the end of this meeting, which was an all-day meeting, okay, at the end of it, the Vatican and the German bishops put out a joint communique, which is already something. I mean, because basically this is the Vatican telling the Germans, we don't trust you to spin this on your own, so we're going to put out a joint statement. And essentially what the joint statement said was that the Germans had promised that whatever they do will be consistent with the ecclesiology of the Second Vatican Council, the provisions of the Code of Canon Law, the fruits of the Pope's Synod of Bishops on synodality, and that it would all be done only with the prior approval of the Vatican. In other words, the Germans basically blanked, basically said, we are not going to act on our own, but we will instead make sure that whatever we do is okay with you. Now, going forward, what does that mean? Well, that's a very interesting question, because let's be fair, the pressures on the German bishops to act without the Vatican's prior approval, that is, to sort of go their own way, are enormous. I mean, not only do we have the historical legacy of the Protestant Reformation in Germany, which created what the late Swiss theologian Hans Urs von Balthasar famously described as the anti-Roman affect, that is, a kind of anti-Roman impulse that is part of the DNA of German Catholicism. But you also have ecumenical relations in Germany and the constant need for Catholics to prove to Lutherans that they aren't just stooges of the Pope, but they are servants of the gospel first. And there is simply secular public opinion in Germany, one of the world's most secular societies, where the legacy of the clerical sexual abuse scandals place enormous pressure on the bishops to satisfy secular expectations, not just the Vatican's wishes. And so how they are going to navigate those shoals remains to be seen. Obviously, we will keep an eye on it at Crux. All right, third up this week, high anxiety. So in the wake of the terrorist attack on that concert hall in Moscow, that at latest count at least has left 139 people dead, more than 100 injured, and some still missing. All across Europe, alarms have gone off, but that is true in a particular way here in Rome, of course, because we are in the middle of Holy Week, where exposure is in some ways at its annual peak, because we have several high-profile events that are set to draw major crowds, and which therefore, unfortunately, also create very inviting terrorist targets. So that includes the Good Friday, the annual Good Friday procession, scheduled this week for Rome's Colosseum. The Pope is supposed to preside, that of course assuming that his health allows. It may be, because it's an evening event and in the open air, his doctors counsel him not to do it, and he will ask somebody to preside in his name. That has yet to be decided. We don't know what's going to happen, but in any event, whether the Pope goes or not, it is still going to be a big public event. And then, of course, we have the Easter Sunday liturgy in St. Peter's Square, the Urbi et Orbi blessing, and all of that. And the reality is that here in Rome, all of that has created deep level of concern among security officials who have announced that they are ratcheting up both physical controls. Excuse me, I'm getting over a cold and I'm coughing a lot. But in any event, they are ratcheting up physical controls. So that's going to mean a heavier, thicker police presence at those public events, that is Good Friday, Easter Sunday. They are also ratcheting up virtual controls. So they're checking, social media and known terrorist bulletin boards and websites and so forth for the kind of chatter that might indicate something coming. Security officials here have said that there has been no specific credible threat yet. Although, on the other hand, there was a small town in Puglia, that's in southern Italy, just a couple days ago, where a section of the Italian railroad had to be shut down for several hours because there was a threat turned out to be a hoax. But somebody had posted a piece of paper on a bulletin board in a train station saying that the train was going to be struck that day with a signature in Arabic. And this resulted in a closure of several hours, obviously, inspection for bombs and all of that. We don't know if something like that might happen during one of the events on the Holy Week calendar that might cause disruptions, delays, consternation. We will see, but this is the unfortunate legacy. We should note that during that Angelus address this past Sunday, which the Pope did deliver in his own voice, he did refer to the Moscow terrorist attack, calling it vile and inhuman, expressing his closeness and his prayers for victims and their families. So the Pope has denounced that attack. Whether that might simply make it more likely that some terrorist faction or another might decide to try to target something in or around the Vatican during Holy Week remains to be seen. We know in the meantime that both the Vatican's own security forces and Italian security forces are doing everything they can to forestall that. All right, fourth up this week, this is an ex-cleric. And this, of course, a reference to the case of now ex-bishop and ex-priest Roger van Heluwe of Belgium. He was the Bishop of Bruges in Belgium until his retirement in 2010, and we probably ought to describe it as his forced retirement because it came amid revelations that he had engaged in a pattern of sexual abuse of his own nephew, beginning over a period of 13 years, beginning when the boy was just 5 years old and extending until he was 18. And this coincided with the period when van Heluwe was a priest and then later became a bishop. In other words, whatever vetting process went on to justify the decision to make him a bishop, it failed to uncover this abuse. Now, listen, the revelation that van Heluwe had abused his own nephew beginning at the age of 5, that obviously was shocking and horrific enough. But it just kind of got worse as things went on, because in an interview that van Heluwe gave around shortly after his resignation, not only did he acknowledge abusing a second nephew, but he also appeared to kind of minimize what he had done. He first denied being a pedophile, even though sexually abusing males who are minors is kind of the dictionary definition of pedophilia. But he also said, and I'm not making this up, he basically said he didn't understand why people were making such a big deal over this because it didn't involve quote-unquote rough sex.
Oh my God.
I mean, the very, apotheosis, right, of someone in denial about what they had done. And just to make matters worse, a recording also emerged of Cardinal Godfrey Danneels, who had been the very powerful Cardinal of Brussels, at one time considered a candidate to be Pope. A recording emerged of him trying to persuade one of these accusers, van Heluwe, not to come forward until after the bishop had reached his normal retirement age of 75 in order to spare him the embarrassment. In other words, encouraging that this accusation be swept under the rug. None of this was a good optic for the Catholic Church in Belgium. Now, when van Heluwe retired in 2010, shortly afterwards, police in Belgium announced that they were unable to prosecute because the statute of limitations under Belgian criminal law for what van Heluwe had acknowledged doing, that statute of limitations had already passed. But there was expectation that there would be some kind of canonical procedure against van Heluwe. The Vatican said, we're looking into it. But then time passed and nothing happened. Now, of course, this acknowledgement and his resignation happened under Pope Benedict XVI. 2 years later, a new pope takes office, Francis. There was some expectation at that point that perhaps the tides would turn and something would be done. But yet, again, nothing happened. Periodically, the bishops of Belgium would tell the press, because they have been under intense public pressure all of this time, to try to explain why nothing has been done. So periodically, the bishops of Belgium would appeal to the Vatican to take action, but it seemed, to pass into the ether, and that nothing was done. All of which brings us to this past week, where at long last, after 14 years, it was announced that Van Louis had been laicized. That is, not only removed as a bishop, but dismissed from the priesthood, from the clerical state altogether. And this, according to a statement from the Vatican Embassy in Belgium, in part because new information, they didn't specify what, but they said new information had come to light that had reactivated the canonical process against him. It was also announced that this had been decided by the Vatican's Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith and executed with the personal approval of Pope Francis. Now, in answer to the question of why is this all happening now, well, again, we don't know what this alleged new information may have been. That certainly may be part of the picture, but most observers would suggest it is also related to the fact that the Vatican has quasi-confirmed that the Pope is going to be traveling to Belgium in September to celebrate the anniversary of the Catholic University of Leuven. And it would be very difficult, I think most people believe, for the Pope to set foot on Belgian soil while the Van Louis case was still hanging over his head. In other words, I think, in terms of the climate of public opinion in Belgium, the takeaway most people seem to have reached about this is that the fact that belatedly, anyway, Van Louis has been sanctioned, that is, laicized, on the basis of his acknowledged abuse, has less to do with the inherent merits of the case and more to do with the PR optics of a looming papal trip. Now, of course, we don't even know if Francis is going to make that trip. It will depend on the vicissitudes of his health between now and then. But in any event, my point is this, that the fact that Van Louis has been laicized hardly takes his case off the table in terms of the climate of public opinion that Pope Francis will be facing when and if.
Message of Joseph W. Tobin, Archbishop of Newark.
My dear brothers and sisters in Christ, the revelation of clergy sexual abuse of minors throughout the past year have provoked feelings of shock, anger, shame, and deep sorrow throughout our Catholic community. Victims, their families, and the faithful are rightly outraged over the abuses perpetrated against minors. Additionally, the failure of church leadership to immediately remove suspected abusers from ministry is particularly reprehensible. In an effort to do what is right and just, we are publishing the names of diocesan clergy credibly accused of sexual abuse of minors in the Archdiocese of Newark. This list of names is the result of an extensive review of archdiocesan records dating back to 1940. All names were previously reported to law enforcement agencies. The Archdiocese of Newark has a zero-tolerance policy for any type of mistreatment or misconduct involving children and young adults. No member of the clergy with a credible allegation of sexual abuse of a minor remains in ministry. No one. It is our sincerest hope that this disclosure will help bring healing to those whose lives have been so deeply violated. We also pray that this can serve as an initial step in our efforts to help restore your trust in the leadership of the Catholic Church. I wish to express my genuine sorrow to the victims and their families who were so profoundly betrayed.
Here's a list of Catholic priest accused her.
This past August, that's when Eddie came out and said that he had been abused by Jerry Sudol. He abused him in our pool at a party. Other incidences in the rectory before or after a mass.
Our first reaction was shock, and then a wave of disappointment and loss of trust came over us.
But through the years, did anything ever happen? Because he was built with anger. And he would deny it. My son was one of the lucky ones. Because he didn't commit suicide. Now, other people are coming forward. This happened, that happened. I'm proud of my son because of what he did by coming out and saying it. Him and some of the other kids did go to the principal at that time. And she said, never happened. Don't go home and tell your parents. You're lying. That's why they never came and told us.
They're very friendly people.
Yeah.
They're huggable with the children and that. So you really have to watch for those signs. Somebody being overly friendly.
Every week, every Sunday.
All the time.
I grew up in Ireland and you had to go to Mass. As you got older, you have children, you want that instilled in them. And you think you're doing the right thing by bringing them to church on Sunday, only to get slapped in the face. We went to Mass every day, every Sunday. I would go to Mass after I dropped my kids off at St. Francis. I would go into Mass. That was my ritual. My faith was my being, my everything. I believe in God, but would I go into the church again? No, I don't go to Mass. That's what we are feeling.
We felt
guilt.
that guilt, and it's not our fault.
It's very hard to believe that. It's not our fault, but I feel like I've punished my children because of my beliefs. I thought I was doing the right thing, but I was not. The Catholic Church ripped my faith out of me and destroyed my son's anything that he ever had. Destroyed anything that he had.
Hi, this is Mike Kelly. I'm a columnist for The Record and NorthJersey.com. I'm standing outside the cathedral here in downtown Paterson on a day of shocking news developments for the Catholic Church. All across New Jersey, Catholic officials released names of priests that they said were credibly accused of child abuse. In Paterson, there were 28 priests. In the Newark Archdiocese, 63. In the Metuchen Diocese, 11. In the Trenton Diocese, 30. And in Camden, 57, a total of 189 priests. The church says that they've alerted law enforcement authorities. Many of these priests have died, but some are still alive. The church insists that all have been taken out of ministry. But what this raises, I think, is a question of credibility. The church is trying to assert itself as a voice in the nation's immigration debate and other moral issues, and yet at the same time, it's dragged back into a crisis or a scandal that has really plagued the church for more than 2 decades. Can the church ease itself out of this? Hard to say at this point in time. But what they're saying right now is church officials are saying the first step is transparency, and that's why they release the names to the general public. So for more, look to NorthJersey.com and for the list of names and also complete coverage of this story in The Record and in NorthJersey.com.
sound I've never heard before, bang, snap. I thought it was maybe like a truck crashed outside the house or something. We're in Hillsdale, New Jersey, and around 12:30, a tree came crashing down through my kitchen and living room. And it kind of went through the skylights, the bathroom area, and the deck as well. I was in the living room with a dog.
I got a frantic call from my husband while I was at work that a tree had fallen over our kitchen, and to call the insurance company, and then I hustled over here. I immediately was panicking, and I dropped everything I was doing, and I came to the house. I was just shocked at the amount of damage. I wasn't expecting it to be that bad.
Bought the house in November. Had about 4 floods since we moved in November. We're not moving. We love the property, love the town.
Today marks 1,680 days. 4 years, 7 months, 6 days, and finally we can say welcome home, LA.
What?
Thank you very much, everyone. I just can't explain how I feel to be here with you today. Before I was arrested, nobody knew much about me in the city. I would just once in a while get on the street and run, because I do long distance run, and I participated in the city's run once in a while. But something is very similar to where I'm coming from. My hometown is a small as what you have here as well. And I remember growing up saying that I would change the world through my hometown of 3,000 people when it was invaded by the police in 1980. Fast forward years later, I found myself in a small town. Just the way my own hometown shook the Nigerian government, through me, it shook our government and the world.
50-year Wall Street veteran is in record-breaking earnings surge. Wall Street is now selling stock at passing 57 months. In fact, it's officially the most traded stock on Wall Street today. Our super fan Kathy Woods is offering her shares. So if you're currently on NVIDIA, you're buying in the weeks ahead. I usually review my recent interviews with Wall Street leader Mark Bacon before you move your money ahead of this time. I want you here. 50-year Wall Street legend issues AI warning. This is when people get it.
Hi, I'm Kelly Brown, host of today's Urgent Stock Market Update. I work for one of the largest independent financial publishers in the world, representing over 1 million people in 148 countries. We're independently funding today's broadcast to address something on the mind of every investor in America right now. Should I put my money in artificial intelligence stocks? Here to answer that for us and give away his #1 AI recommendation totally free is 50-year Wall Street titan Mark Chaikin. Mark's been a trader, stockbroker, and analyst. He was the head of the options department at a major brokerage firm and is a sought-after expert for CNBC, Fox Business, Barron's, and Yahoo Finance. But what Mark's most known for is his award-winning stock rating system, which determines whether a stock could shoot sky high in the next 3 to 6 months or come crashing down. That's why Mark's work appears in every Bloomberg and Reuters terminal on the planet and is still used by hundreds of banks, hedge funds, and brokerages to track the billions of dollars flowing in and out of stocks each day. He's used this system to survive 9 bear markets, create 3 new indices for the NASDAQ, and even predict the brutal bear market of 2022 90 days in advance. So you can see why CNBC's Jim Cramer has said he's learned never to bet against Mark. Mark, welcome back.
It's great to see you again, Kelly. I'm glad we're doing this because, wow, I don't remember a topic this hot since cryptomania. I'm seeing and hearing about artificial intelligence everywhere. Friends are calling me and emailing me out of the blue to get my opinion. My wife and I were just in Italy, and they're even talking about it over there. But with 50 years of investing experience to my name, this has me deeply worried. This is often when people get hurt, Kelly. Scottish anthropologist Charles Mackay said it best when he wrote, "Men think in herds, they go mad in herds, while they only recover their senses slowly, one by one."
It sure seems that way. In fact, I pulled a few things in preparation for our chat today. Here's the number of people searching for AI on Google. A huge spike. Same with AI stocks. Just a massive run-up in interest beginning in 2023.
Absolutely, and all that excitement has spilled into the stock market. It's now being reported that AI-themed investments have added $1.4 trillion in stock market value just in 2023 alone. Even more shocking, just six AI-related companies are responsible for 53% of all S&P 500 gains we've seen thus far.
That's right, and they're the names everyone expects, too. Microsoft, Alphabet, Amazon.com, Meta Platforms, NVIDIA, and Salesforce. So, Mark, your system flashed buy on all these stocks in early 2023. Isn't that right?
Yep, all six. You can see it could have gotten you into Meta here, Salesforce here, and the number one stock of the year to date, NVIDIA, here.
I can't say I'm surprised, Mark. Your market predictions have always been spot on. You called the beginning and end of the COVID crash in 2020. Then you urged your followers to prepare for an epic rally just 24 hours before the starting gun of the greatest stock market recovery in history. Since then, you called the 2022 bear market, the 2023 bank run, and the start of the new bull market all in advance. You know, you even went on CNBC and predicted the downfall of Priceline.com right before the stock dropped 100 points overnight. So is that what you're doing now? Are you here to issue a warning to call a bubble in artificial intelligence?
Not exactly. Fox Business recently asked me to share my thoughts on AI with their audience, and I said, AI changed the equation. The technology is clearly here to stay. It already has massive buy-in from the biggest and most well-established tech companies of the past 20 years. I believe there's still plenty of money to be made in the right AI stocks, potentially hundreds of % gains from here. That's why I'm giving away the name and the ticker of a promising AI stock today. But let me be clear. As I'm about to show you, the run-up in AI stocks is not the whole story. What's going on is much, much bigger than AI. Surely you and everyone else knows this mania won't last forever, because nothing does. I've seen this over and over throughout my career. It was gold in the 70s, then Japanese and Asian stocks, the internet boom, crypto, social media. You can see all of this research on our disclosures and disclaimers page, by the way. It's linked below. My point is, there has always been and there always will be some investment du jour, the next big thing that makes early investors a fortune, then ultimately harms the investors who buy in too late. It goes as far back as the tulip mania during the 17th century Dutch Golden Age. Did you know that at some point things got so crazy that people exchanged 12 sheep or 1,000 pounds of cheese for a single tulip bulb? Now, you know you can't feed your family tulips during a cold Dutch winter.
So you're here to prevent people from making those classic mistakes.
That's right. As I'll show you, I've helped hundreds of thousands of individuals around the world safely navigate trends like this. And it's all thanks to the stock picking system I built during my 50 years on Wall Street. But I don't just focus on AI or technology stocks, not by a long shot. My system finds winners in everything from commodities to car companies. I even once recommended Sleep Number, You know, the mattress company, to my followers just before it shot up nearly 200%.
If you're wondering how Mark knew to recommend Sleep Number before its near 200% run-up, the answer is simple. He's the inventor and financial mind behind a system Wall Street traders use to this day to pick their stocks. His award-winning system represents the gold standard for investment research, quality, and accuracy. And for good reason. Mark's system accurately detected all 10 of the top 10 stocks of 2022 in advance and identified multiple triple-digit opportunities during the worst year for stocks since 2008, like Occidental Petroleum before Warren Buffett bought in and the stock shot up 107%, and natural gas firm EQT Corp before it shot up 124%. Again, these are 100% plus potential gains at the same time the overall market struggled. It's also worth noting that the last time Mark gave away a free recommendation to the public, it went on to jump 66% in just 3 months. So I highly recommend you have a pen and paper ready for his free recommendation today. But first, I'd like to start with your views on the technology itself, Mark. Artificial intelligence, it can be as exciting as it is scary.
Oh yeah, particularly for many of my retired friends and family members. Skepticism is a good and increasingly rare trait. So if you feel that way about AI, good for you. You're not clueless or a dinosaur just because you have your concerns. At the same time, you can't ignore the fact that the top 5 stocks of the last 30 years have all been tech stocks, responsible for creating $7.82 trillion in new American wealth. No matter where you stand on tech, you can't ignore it as an investment opportunity. Tech investments have likely made the average retail consumer more money than anything else. And it's nearly impossible to make much money in the stock market decade after decade, ignoring hot tech trends.
So you want to be skeptical and strategic.
Exactly. That's where I come.
Through me again, how it became one of the most popular phrases throughout my 5-year stay. In Nigeria, everybody knew how to spell this place.
poison, blasters, element, transcendencies, anything. Wow, that's too long. Yeah, that's too long. Yeah, that's too long.
It's an older structure that has been in Richfield for a long time, known as the Tottle Inn. The Tottle Inn was a residence for multiple families to live in. It was sort of like a bed and breakfast style of structure. I grew up in this town, and it was around forever. So it's got to be over 100 years old. At 2:20 a.m., the Richfield Fire Department was dispatched to what was confirmed a working house fire. On my arrival, I had a completely involved structure. I called the units and told them that we were going completely defensive.
Mm.
And the record. We have been reporting across the USA Today network about news that 188 priests of the Roman Catholic Church have had their names disclosed by dioceses across the Garden State today for being involved and implicated in cases of sexual abuse. We wanted to invite you to explore a searchable database that we've built that allows you to search by parish, by town, and by diocese for priests who may have been in contact with children, men or women, or other victims over the years here in the Garden State. In addition, we've set up a victims hotline for victims of sexual abuse through the Catholic Church who may want to share their stories with us. By calling 973-569-7109, you can share your story with NorthJersey.com, The Record, and the USA Today Network.
Today, we're at our Early Childhood Center, the Eugenio Maria de Costas Early Childhood Center, and at Jose Marti STEM Academy, which is our gifted and talented high school. The pre-K and preschool room, which means the kids are between the ages of 3 and 5. And we have 15 students in the classroom because we try to keep a small teacher-to-pupil ratio in our schools because the kids get better attention that way. And as you saw, we have a head teacher, we have an assistant teacher, and because we have one child who is special needs in that classroom, she has a dedicated IDEA, which is Individuals with Disabilities Education Act aide. The dedication of our staff, our administrators, our teachers, who are dedicated to our students. That's our job, is to educate our students. And from the beginning of the pandemic, we acted quickly to make sure that our community pulled together to give our students the best possible chance for success. We emptied our schools of technology to provide them with laptops or tablets, and then we ordered technology to replace that when needed. Everybody pulls together to do what's needed. Our teachers would visit students at home during the pandemic and talk to them from outside, from the front steps, to make sure that they were staying on top of lessons. We provided more than 4 million meals to our students, 14 meals per week per student, to ensure that they were eating every single day.
I created a lending library at Terminal A for passengers to take books. I got a mix of children's books, adult books, and all of those books I collected from Facebook, libraries, and a bunch of other donations. I also used a few of my old books to put in the library. My favorite book is probably Save Me a Seat by Sarah Weeks and Geeta Varajaraman. I love realistic fiction, and I feel like it's a really relatable book that could happen in real life, and it's really interesting. Let me tell you, if you pick up that book, you will not want to put it down. Visit that library, because isn't reading better than just staring at a screen the whole time? So if you come to Terminal A, be sure to check out the library, because trust me, books are way, way, way better than looking at a screen.
Who's writing? Who's writing the false? Who's writing? It's on the side. Looking right car. And so, suddenly, So what do you do? Even as it is, it's almost next step, moves the text and phone call from the surgery. Person case and date, answer schedule, phone call, answer. Oh, I Mm-hmm.